Today is August 15th, 2025. It is Talking Giants brought to you by SeatGeek. And we have Art Stapleton on the show today from The Record, NorthJersey.com. All in with Art Stapleton. You know Art. You love Art. Really love this interview. Touched on a lot. And you know Art really loves to go into detail with the stuff he likes and he talks about. And we talk about the New York Football Giants. Hope you're excited about the preseason game this weekend. I'm excited. I'm going to be home covering it. Excited for Jaxson Dart. Even excited. I didn't get a chance to talk to Art about like some of the roster shakeups that could happen. I feel like there's a couple guys at the bottom of the roster that are competing for one spot. Guys like Mbow Collins, guys like TJ Moore, who's a corner that was getting like first team reps towards the end of the Jets Giants joint practice. Turbo Miller, how can he take a step up in special teams? Dalen Cambry, Darnell Washington, D. Williams, like maybe those guys are kind of in this. I went from thinking that it was like when Bryce Ford Wheaton goes down, that it like the battle for like the 50th to 53 guys on the roster, the 50th to the 53rd guys on the roster. I thought that was just like a wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 thing. I don't think it is. I think it's now open to a couple different positions, and Giants are really giving some different guys an extended run at making some sort of impact. And Mbow Collins was out last week against the Bills. It's a guy that the Giants really like. It's a guy that the Giants have boosted up the depth chart, especially as injuries have gone on to wide receivers. So Mbow Collins is definitely probably my number one player to watch out for that isn't your conventional players on Saturday against the Jets. Will Neal play? Will Jalin Hyatt play? We had a really fascinating conversation about Jalin Hyatt, and I kind of just asked Art Stapleton, do you think Jalin Hyatt's going to make the 53-man roster by the time it gets to week 1 against Washington? So you'll want to hear his answer on that. So appreciate you listening. Tell Art thanks that you really liked this Talking Giants interview. And before I get to Art Stapleton, we got to talk about Chubbies, because are you ready for some football? If you're not, Chubbies is ready to help you with their NFL collection. Whether you're tailgating, grilling, or riding the highs and lows of the game from your couch, Chubbies is the ultimate football apparel brand. So much so that they created their own fantasy football league. George Kittle, Ian Rappaport, and others, they've come together to assemble the Chubbies League on NFL Fantasy. Each week, the top 5 scorers will win a chance at a Chubbies polo shorts combo with their team's logo. The grand champion gets a chance at the ultimate fan experience, a 5-city, 5-stadium NFL game tour with a +1. While the fantasy flop faces a hilarious and unforgettable punishment, only Chubbies could pull off. So head to chubbyshorts.com/the Chubbies League to learn more and have some fun. Get ready for the most outrageous fantasy football season of your life. And would you look at that? For a limited time, our friends at Chubbies are giving you, our listeners, $10 off with the promo code GIANTS at chubbyshorts.com/Giants. That's $10 off your order with the promo code GIANTS. And that includes the NFL collection as well. Support our show. Tell them we sent you. Express yourself and level up your game day wardrobe with Chubbies. Here is Art Stapleton of The Record. All right, welcome back to the show, and I want to welcome onto the show Art Stapleton from NorthJersey.com, The Record, and the host of the All In Show with Art Stapleton. I would say out of all the Giants podcasts, and there's a lot of them, that don't have the name Giants in them, All In is the best name for a Giants podcast. So, Art, thank you for joining me, and what a scene we got in the background today. You're outside, you're enjoying yourself, and it's pretty hot. You not hot?
Yeah, a little bit, little hot, but there's no school, so family they're entitled. The family, my wife and daughter, are entitled to the inside the house. So, today we got a little change up in the schedule with the Giants going for a walkthrough instead of a full practice. So we had to do everything on Zoom, and kind of lets us be home, but got to find a little convenience here to meet up with my boy Justin and talk a little Giants football. So here we are.
So as things have gone on more Zoom last couple of years, and it's been less Zoom obviously compared to a couple of years ago. Is there who's had like the strangest background, strangest setup out of people on the beat that have made you just go like, huh? Like what's going on there? Any stories that you can tell?
Now you're looking to me to spill some tea, huh?
Yes. First
well,
thing.
You know what? One guy on the beat who is always willing to make fun of himself is Ryan Dunleavy.
Yeah.
So Ryan, I think he's kind of mastered it now, but at the beginning, he was one of those who would always hold the phone really up close to his face and, am I on? Am I muted? That kind of thing. And another one who has retired That was Tom Canavan of the Associated Press. Tom just really got to the point where he gave no F's. And, last year, towards the end of the year, he'd be on his couch, he'd be sitting on his bed.
Oh, awesome.
He really didn't care. I mean, what's funny though is that the Giants this year, I don't know if they've changed the screen that both Dable and the players are looking at, but I think it must be bigger because since really it started with Russ and Jameis, and it's happened several times. If the guys are paying attention, when the PR person says, okay, next question from Justin Pennick talking Giants, the name is across your screen. So a lot of these guys are kind of sharp and they realize it's, hey, Justin.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So when Russ had his first press conference and he's calling people by first names, everybody was like, oh
my God, this guy really does his homework.
Right, exactly. Because we knew he dropped 25 names of Giants personnel and, front office. But so that's kind of been the fun part from the other end. And then if you're the one guy who doesn't, or gal who doesn't get your name mentioned by the player, then it's always, becomes an inside joke depending on which, clicks want to make fun of you. Like Javon Holland, when he had his presser, I guess it was after he signed, when they introduced me, when I asked the question, he said, hey, nice to meet you, Bart. So
tough.
It was, it was funny. I took it, as a joke, and I said, "Hey, no problem." It's, and then everybody, my texts are blowing up from all the guys on the beat. Hey, good job, Simpson, Doe, stuff like that. But it became kind of a joke between Javon Holland and I, beginning at camp. I went up to him and I said, it's the first time we're meeting each other, but I was the guy you called Bart. And at first he didn't get it, but then he was like, okay, all right, I got you. So we've been cool ever since. So
no, it's funny. I saw Rosenblatt on the sidelines, because he's with the Jets and he's with the Athletic. So he did an article when he first came on about just like a Giants regular season ticket holders when he was with the Giants and NJ.com. Giants regular season ticket holders. So he's like, all right, I want to talk to you. And he said, Justin Penkin. So ever since then, like I texted him because I'm like, hey, what's up, man? I see you. So then he's like Penkin. So Penkin became like an inside joke with a couple people. So that's always fun. I embrace Penkin.
It's like you guys, you're Penkin, and it's like you and I with the chair. I mean, the chair.
Oh my gosh!
In infamy.
What a moment.
Or fame, whichever one. But yeah,
that chair might have saved the Giants. That's the last time they made the playoffs. When you gave me that chair, when there was some sort of exchange of a chair. That's the last time they had any success. So
yeah, I don't even remember why I gave you the chair.
I needed it. I tweeted it out in the morning. And so this is game day, by the way. Game day. We'll get to Jets Giants joint practice. This is a game day morning. Not like, oh, I'm at practice. I'm at this. I'm at that. Game day morning where I'm sure you got stuff to do and everything like that. I tweeted out, I need a chair. I forgot my chair. And here you come, just you appear with the chair. And it's like, oh, shit, Art, thanks.
Yeah, it was funny. It was one of those when my daughter was still playing soccer, so you always had the chairs in the back of the car. And hey, I helped my boy Justin, and then 5 months later we were able to get it back from you, not because of you keeping it hostage, but it was just one of those things.
I wanted to. I wanted to keep it.
You wanted the Ossining chair in the back. That was always funny. Everybody asking you, why do you have an Ossining chair? And it was almost like, well, it's a longer story.
Funny story about that.
Yeah.
Funny story about Ossining.
What about the Giants?
Let's do it. Giants Jets joint practice the last couple days. What's your main takeaways from it?
I think the first thing is that look, you got to start with the pass rush and what they were able to do, and I don't want to hear anything about, the Jets are starting younger players and all this stuff. We play this game, Justin, right? Where we go back, we make such a big deal about certain things, like all these rankings that come out in June and July when, there's nothing else. So everyone comes up with filler, and it's all the national outlets and, we jump into and, who's ranking. I mean, I saw a ranking going into the season that it was the Jets have a top 5 offensive line in the league, with the guys that they've assembled, Fashanu and Mbow and AVT and, all the guys that they have on that line. Look, Brian Burns was a menace. I wrote it 3 weeks ago. The Giants behind the scenes were like, he's a psycho. Like we gotta calm him down in practice. He is just taking it to another level. And I ended up having a fun story about Burns last week that posted. So I was kind of ahead of the curve about how he approaches practice and he watches from a different vantage point. I know you've been in the stands for the training camp practices. I saw it last year, and then this year, first couple of days, I saw it again. He stands by the coaches and the quarterbacks, and he doesn't stay on the sideline. And I just wondered, does he just like to wander? And I asked him, and he said, no, like it's something he's done since his second year in Carolina, and he likes to get a different view. He wants a global view. He wants to see both ends. He wants to be able to see the defense and the way it's happening. And he also wants to help out the offense and say, if he sees something, he'll go to Russell Wilson or he'll go to Jaxson Dart and say, hey, I saw this. Like, we're reading you off of this. This is where we can improve. He's not trying to pick up tips so that the next day in practice he could dominate Marcus Mbow a little bit more because he's studying him. He's trying to get the team better. So overall, I mean, look, Burns was the best player on the field, bar none. It didn't matter who was on the field. That includes Dexter. I mean, and look, Dex is still easing his way back in from the elbow. And why would you burn Dexter Lawrence out right now? You wouldn't. So, but he's been in there a little bit, and what we've seen has been vintage Dex. But I think the funny thing is I stayed and watched the Giants offense both days because I knew what was happening on the defensive side of the ball for the Giants. And the Jets just, I think it's probably unfair saying they couldn't function, but the pass rush that was coming in waves seemed to be finding its sync, if that makes any sense. They were working together a little bit more, and we'll see what happens. So that's my first big takeaway on defense. And then on the offensive end of things, I think, they've been up and down. And I think the first day you look at the Jets personnel as well, and they were on the field. The Giants passing game, the big thing I take away from they desperately need Malik Neighbors.
Oh, yeah.
They need a healthy Darius Slayton, and they need a running game because you can't just look at this and say the running game doesn't exist. Because Tyrone Tracy, I think, is poised and primed for a big year. Last year, I don't know if you want to term it a breakout, but I think Tracy, played well last year. I think he can really break out and be that 1,200-yard back if things break right. So those would be my takeaways. That defense is here, and the offense, look, there still needs to be that run game component here to kind of mask some of those other issues if Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton are not on the field.
Getting back to the pass rush for a second, one of the things that they've been talking about, especially the guys that have been here, Kayvon, I know, spoke yesterday, I believe. Burns has been talking all throughout camp, obviously leaders of the team. Dex has talked. And I think a common theme of what they're all saying is, we're all glad it looks great on paper. We're all glad that there's people here and there's an expectation, right? But you don't win on paper. We finally got to get out there and we got to do it. And things have to be different this year. And, I think fans talk about that every year. And it's like, oh, well, do the players feel like that? And I actually feel like, yes, I feel like a lot of the guys that have been in there for a couple of years, and even Burns coming from an organization like Carolina that probably has been saying the same message and like, we got to turn things around. They know that they have to, and I like that mentality of, like, it's not just on paper. We got to go out there and we got to prove it. Glad that there's expectations, glad that there's this. Talk about that messaging that's been coming out of the defense, specifically that defensive line. And, hell, even some of the guys like Debo and Holland that have been here too, I'm sure they're echoing a similar message.
Yeah, it's true. And I think from Dexter Lawrence, and I'll go right to Dexter Lawrence's interview after the first joint practice down at Florham Park. It was kind of funny because, you don't know how guys are going to, teammates have been raving about Abdul Carter all summer and raving. It's very easy to talk up the pass rush because they've been producing in practice. And what Dex said was, number one, it's good that we did it today, but now it's over with. Now tomorrow is the biggest day of the summer. And he was asked about Darius Alexander and gave a good answer about Darius Alexander growing and listening and, becoming a part of this front. And then he was asked about Abdul Carter. And now, everybody's been raving about Abdul Carter. He's the Darren Waller of the 2025 Giants training camp, right?
Let's use a different.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just making the point. Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're right.
He's Malik Neighbors of 2025.
Yeah.
But it's been to that level of dominance and even more so. And Dex said, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Let's wait and see. And it was and then he followed it with a trademark Dex chuckle. That's kind of the Joker, and then kind of the, old school villain who just, tied someone up to the train tracks. It was we know this kid is good, but we're going to keep our mouth shut and we're going to just approach week one and see the Cowboys and the Commanders and say, you know what, this is what we got. Now we want to prove it. So I do think that is a point of emphasis for this team. I think the leaders have taken it upon themselves to talk about how they've done nothing yet. And then it does come back to stopping the run. I mean, if you're going to face a team in this league that is going to be willing to run the ball at you, you've got to prove that you can stop it. Now, I don't know. I think the Giants might want teams to say, we're going to run the ball at you. You might want Washington and Dallas to take the ball out of their best playmakers' hands and say, we're going to hand it off. That's no disrespect to the guys they have, but the Giants might want to take their chances in stopping the run and say, you know what, if you don't want Jaden Daniels to throw the ball 30 times and roll out and try to be creative and make plays, well then, okay, then we'll put Abdul Carter as a spy and let him spy Jaden Daniels. And then we're just going to put our run stopping personnel and say, now we're going to stop you at what we want you to do, not what you do best.
Yeah. And it's just so important for this defense. They have to get, and this is every defense in the league, but especially for a defense with the identity like this, that's going to pin their ears back. And they may have an expectation to have a sack rate of 10%, which is crazy. I've done trying to go as many years as back as I could on Pro Football Reference. I don't think there's been a team in franchise history that has had a sack rate of 10%. They were doing it up until November last year. And then Dexter Lawrence goes down, gets hurt, and the season falls apart from there. I expect this team to be one out of every 10 pass plays, put the quarterback on the ground, and you got to get into 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5, and longer on a consistent basis. And if your run defense isn't right, those defenses are going to be having 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3s, and then you're going to have to play defense a little bit differently, as opposed to if it's a 3rd and long, we know what you're doing, and we could just go and get the quarterback. So hopefully that run defense fixes itself up.
I think about that last year too, Justin, just to add on that. Remember, Burns wasn't healthy the entire year.
Right.
He dealt with the ankle, and Kayvon was just coming into his own, really, as far as a complete player, and then he gets hurt, and then Dex gets hurt. I think the one thing they do have this year is more depth up front. And again, depth is great, but these guys got to be able to play. And I think Roy Robertson Harris showed in the game, and I saw Carl Banks talk about this, but I said it during the game, is that sometimes you see enough of this. And now for me, it's going on, 17 years, which is insane on this, on this beat, is that, sometimes guys know what they have to show in training camp and practice. And then when the lights go on, they take it to another level. I think that's Roy Robertson Harris, because he was great in Buffalo. I mean, we hadn't seen that player in practice.
No, not at all.
The Giants. And now all of a sudden, without Dexter Lawrence in the lineup, and really with, essentially, guys kind of mix and matching, being very vanilla, he was very good that day in Buffalo. So it'll be interesting to see what he does against the Jets if the starters are out there on Saturday night.
Right.
But yeah, look, depth. You mentioned Chauncey Golston before. I mean, he's the 4th edge guy.
He was a starter for Dallas last year. That was a good defense. So at least putting the quarterback on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's interesting because Golston could be that guy who moves inside a little bit. Yeah. I think you have Darius Alexander. You can take your time a little bit with Darius Alexander. They haven't forced him. He looked good in the joint practices against the Jets. He was running with the ones at the end of the first day in the red zone periods and registered a sack after Burns registers a sack. So I think they've got guys that they want to bring along in that mix and match. But let's be honest, if it gets to 3rd long, even third and medium, it's all going to be about Burns,
Yeah.
Lawrence, Thibodeau, and Carter, and how they go. I think will be how this
Yeah.
defense goes.
Other side of the ball on the offense, I'm going to read a tweet that you put out today because today is Thursday. We're recording this. We're putting this out on Friday. So you have a story on Jaxson Dart coming out the day that everybody's listening to this. And here's what you said. Seemingly every big play Jaxson Dart has made this past week has come from matching his mind to his physical tools. And I think that's a big reason why Brian Daboll loves the growth he is seeing from the rookie quarterback. He makes it look routine. So you said more of that tomorrow on NorthJersey.com. Tell me a little bit about what's in there, what you're writing, what you're thinking about, and tell me some more about Jaxson Dart.
Well, there are three plays that I mean we've seen his presence in the pocket, his pocket awareness. Is really a big part of his game that you don't know until you see the guy out there on the field, right? I mean, now granted, I admit this. We all know the quarterback play that we've seen from the Giants. It's not about piling on Daniel Jones or who they've had beyond him. Even go back to Tyrod Taylor when everyone wanted to talk about Tyrod and how Tyrod was so much better than Daniel and everything else. Tyrod was a one read guy too. It was throw the guy that run Slayton deep, run Hyatt deep, and Tyrod will hit him. I think the way Jaxson Dart plays the game. And again, it's not necessarily with the first team. I'll give you three plays. Number one was the end of the red zone period against the Jets on day one, when Zach Pascal is going to get all the attention for that catch that he made in the end zone. Kind of juggled it, corralled it, completed it, put both feet down. Dart knew the read, knew it was going to be there, and put the ball exactly where it needed to be, on a back shoulder, out of bounds. The only player who can get it was Pascal, and he knew that. He knew that when you broke the huddle, and he knew that if it was open, he was going to take it. After that play, Daboll was fired up, just pointing at Jaxson Dart. And I actually said this on my own podcast. It was almost like analyze this. It was the Robert De Niro meme of you. Like Daboll saw it, he knew it, and that was where his focus was. It wasn't that he wasn't going to not celebrate Pascal because it was a great catch, but ultimately that catch doesn't get made if Dart doesn't put that ball exactly where it was. And then two more yesterday, Wednesday, so we'll say 2 days ago from the taping, he had the touchdown pass to Beau Collins, and after the game, after the practice, he basically admitted, look, when I got to the line of scrimmage, it was a one side, one throw read on both sidelines. That's the way Dart, I think he talked about it, because he had a receiver he thought was going to be singled up on the left. He had a receiver who he thought was going to be singled up on the right, and it was basically going to be a look at me, check with me when he got to the line of scrimmage, and he checked to the right, and the play wasn't there. So he knew it was going to end up being a scramble. So he gave it a chance. He scrambled a little bit to the right, and then he kind of gave one of those, pointing to the end zone to Beau Collins, and still looking up with the vision down the field. And Beau Collins broke for the end zone, and he hit him wide open. The Jets didn't stick with the coverage, and he scored on that. And then the last one that I had heard this after the fact, which I didn't realize, but in his touchdown pass in the game against Buffalo, when he got to the line of scrimmage, it was an alert. And his alert was to little Jordan Humphrey, that he knew he looked at the safety, and that was Damar Hamlin, and he was too far over in the middle. So he wouldn't be able to close the gap. And he knew he had little Jordan Humphrey on a go route. And he basically alerted him, and Humphrey knew, and he took the go ball. And then obviously Jaxson Dart not only takes the hit from TJ Sanders, but put the ball exactly where it needed to be, 29 yards and a touchdown. So I think the point of all this is just, to me, the idea is that you think about Daniel Jones, his high points here as a Giant, and there were all about his athleticism. It was all about him running the football. What could he do to kind of make plays when they weren't there? And last year, all it was about was he was missing these reads. And you go back, the final nail in, I think, Daniel Jones's career here was the flea flicker in Germany, that you had two reads and he just basically took the sack on a flea flicker. Mm-hmm. So for me, what I like most about Jaxson Dart is that he seems like he's in sync with his receivers, with his reads. And I asked Daboll about that on his conference call, And he just basically said, look, if you have vision, if you're a quarterback that can read the defense, and that's not easy, he said, you can make big plays because you know what's coming. You can see it before it happens. And I know it's still too soon. And Jaxson Dart, who knows? In 2 weeks, he'll be standing on the sidelines holding a clipboard. For how long? Who knows? But I think that's kind of the genesis of my story today, looking at Jaxson Dart going into Saturday night, is that's what I like most about his game right now. Yeah, you could talk about how, he's got some juice in his arm. He's athletic. He loves to take off and run. That scramble he had in the preseason game. He's got some moxie. Dable's used that word a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's his mind. I think he's smart. And you go back to pre-draft, Justin, that's why they wanted Jaxson Dart. Yeah. That's why Shedeur Sanders fell off of their radar and maybe even was taken off their board, is because it's not because Shedeur Sanders is dumb. That's not the point. The point is that to run this offense, Dable wanted a quarterback that can read it, see it, and throw it. Yeah. And I think Dart blew them out of the water when it came to those tests in the pre-draft process.
Yeah, and it just seems like from what you're saying, he's embracing what Brian Dable's asking him to do, which I think that, again, to compare back to the large sample size we've had with Daniel Jones, there were good times. There were certainly a little bit more bad the last couple of years, but it just didn't fully seem like that was a quarterback that was willing to do the things that Brian Dable wanted him to do. And honestly, what I think Brian Dable kind of presents quarterbacks. I don't think it's just this hard scheme that I think Garrett was saying. You have to be so precise and you have to read everything. Everything has to be so perfect. I think for Brian Dable, things don't necessarily have to look perfect. There's room to run around, scramble, improvise, and these things that it seems like they work on. And certainly somebody of Jaxson Dart's skill set of having the athleticism, like you were talking about in the joint practice, kind of play breaking down, but we're still going to keep things alive and we're still going to find a way to get Mbow Collins a touchdown. So that's awesome that, Jaxson Dart embracing what Brian Dable's asking him to do, and knowing Brian Dable and knowing his offensive scheme. I think as the years have gone on and certain criticisms we've had of Dable, I don't think any of them have been the guy doesn't know how to call an offense and the guy doesn't know how to run offense. I think that has been, if anything, that's been the least of the problems that we've all felt here in East Rutherford. So
I think that's a benefit too, Justin. I think everybody wants to talk. You notice how we're not really making play calling a big thing, right? The play calling, and Dable's not even making a big deal out of it, because it's almost like he knows this is the direction they're going. Everybody knows, why am I even going to bother trying to keep it under wraps? The biggest thing about the play calling last week was Mike Kafka was on the sideline and not up in the booth calling.
Oh yeah, huge. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how they do it, at home now at MetLife, the next two preseason games. But, look, I was told, Dable is going to be with Jaxson. Now, it doesn't mean he's not coaching the other quarterbacks or coaching the entire team, but he's breaking down film. If it's 11 o'clock at night, now maybe not during the season, but he's breaking down Jaxson film because he knows this is his future. This is his quarterback, and he wants to be here and coach the guy. And I think that's, it doesn't mean that he wants to play him in week one either. He wants to be able to play him when he's ready. And I think, that's a big step for this franchise whenever it gets taken.
What in the world is going on with Jalin Hyatt? Because lay out a little bit of a timeline for me. I think we're practicing leading up to the Bills game. And then since we've been limited, but what's going on there?
I don't know. It's hard shaking everything that happened last season. I mean, how definitive were the reports? Jordan Renan had this story about him requesting a trade. Hyatt said that wasn't what happened. Everybody in the front office said it wasn't what happened. And then you see the season that kind of played out. I mean, look, Jalin Hyatt and the Giants, something's not right there. I mean, we know something's not right. And it may just be a simple fact of they want him to do certain things. He wants to do things the way he wants. He's trying to do things the way they want. They haven't gotten the ball. Then an opportunity presents itself last week, and he can't play, and the doctors hold him out. And then he's only limited in yesterday. He did some early on, some positional drills, but then when team drills came, he was on the sideline. I mean, Justin, it's hard for me overall to see this offense, this passing offense, without Slayton, without Neighbors, and without Hyatt, and say the Giants have what they need at wide receiver. So for me, I'm making the call to Gabe Davis. Like, unless Gabe Davis's knee was not recovering, I mean, they know Gabe Davis, he's still out there. I make the call, I make the pitch, and I bring him in. And it gets to a point where you can't keep waiting for Jalin Hyatt. Unfortunately, and again, it might be the Giants' fault. I can't tell you for sure that it's Jalin Hyatt's fault. But like I said, something is not right there. And I just don't know what you do. I mean, I think you try to get him on the field for the preseason game on Saturday night. You try to get him on the field for the preseason game against the Patriots. Is it a trade? Look, what are you getting back for Jalin Hyatt? I mean, You're not getting back more than a conditional pick, day 3 pick, and I'm talking late day 3.
Yeah.
Is Jalin Hyatt in a trade for another position that a team is going to end up cutting somebody, that the Giants really could use, whether it's an interior lineman, which most likely, or a corner. And I think that's ultimately, is there a corner that they like that's out there? Maybe you throw Hyatt in a pick. I'm not sure, but those are the two spots that, if I'm Joe Shane and Brian Dable, I'm not 100% comfortable with banking on what they're going to get from Banks or Flott at corner 2 and what they're going to get from Hyatt to show that depth in the wide receiver room. So, look, if Hyatt is here, I don't know how he's on the game day roster with what he's shown this summer. I just don't know how that happens. Could that change in a week? Maybe. If he goes out there and catches a couple bombs from Russell or Jaxson Dart or even Jameis Winston, could they see that and say, we want him, we want to keep him here? I don't think they're looking to get rid of Jalin Hyatt, but I think it does. There's a point where the rubber meets the road. And I think at this point, this team can't afford to carry guys hoping that they're going to develop into players, because they just don't have that depth behind them, that proven depth. And if there's a move to be made, you've got to make it.
Week 1, not 53-man cutdown day. Week 1, Sunday against the Commanders. Is Jalin Hyatt on the 53-man roster?
Right now, I'd have to say no. I'd have to say no. And I don't know if you're going to load up with, look, I don't think the combination of Beau Collins and Montrell Washington and Little Jordan Humphrey and Zach Pascal are bumping Jalin Hyatt from the 53.
I think Jalin Hyatt is bumping Jalin Hyatt from the 53 with him not being on the field and also not performing clearly up to their standards. That's what I think it really is.
100%. But I guess my point is that I don't know if Joe Shane and the coaching staff could look at the talent that they believe Hyatt has and say, we're going to keep the rest of those guys and just cut Hyatt loose. You're almost better off keeping Hyatt. Like, are you keeping Hyatt and putting Little Jordan Humphrey on the practice squad and then hoping he bumps up, for his first 3 weeks? I mean, that might be the way to go. Montrell Washington, is he really going to get claimed by a team out there?
I would say no.
Right. So those guys you can kind of stash on the practice squad. Ultimately, those guys could come up and take that game day spot from a Jalin Hyatt. So unless they replace Jalin Hyatt on the active roster, like I said, with a guy like Gabe Davis, or, look, Amari Cooper's still out there. Like, is it worth placing a call to Amari Cooper saying, hey, Amari, you want to come here? Like, you can be at worst number 3 on our team. You play with Malik Neighbors. We'll get you, some incentives, and, we can guarantee you playing time. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, my answer would be no. I don't think Jalin Hyatt is playing because you get no value out of him just standing on the sideline, waiting for 1 or 2 reps where you can put him on the field, throw him a go ball, and then say, see, we tried getting the ball to Jalin Hyatt. That time has passed at this point.
All right, before we keep talking with Art Stapleton, today's episode is sponsored by DraftKings. Football fans. The season is just around the corner, and for every team and every fan base, there's renewed hope. Everyone starts with a zero in the loss column, and there's no better time to jump in with our partners at the DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, new customers who bet just $5, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. New customers use our promo code JMFootball, all one word. Bet $5 on any wager, get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code JMFootball only at the DraftKings Sportsbook. Now back to Art. One more player whose future may or may not be murky. At least you kind of threw me off a little bit because you came on during the spring and you talked about Bobby Okereke, and it was kind of like an open challenge. And we know there were some effort questions last year, but I'm even sitting there in the spring being like, all right, that's behind us.
Right.
Still a player that has a green dot and still like a leader, captain of this team. All right, that's behind us. But then you come on in the spring, and even like anytime Blake Martinez's name comes up next to another player that's on the roster, I don't think you were comparing the situations, but the name came up, and I'm like, oh gosh, like, are we really getting into that territory? So do you have another Bobby Okereke update? How's the relationship between him and the organization? He's out there. He's linebacker number one. But hopefully there's not something that's creeping up like Blake Martinez kind of crept up. 53-man cutdown day is not on the team. Give me a Bobby Okereke update.
Yeah, I don't see that. I definitely have a different feel for the Okereke situation than I did in the spring. I mean, look, the reality is that he's likely playing his last year with the Giants, and the other part of this is not only is Micah McFadden on the final year of his deal, behind them, the Giants don't have another linebacker that all of a sudden is going to become your Mike linebacker and call this defense. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I was high on Deontay Johnson. I thought maybe that he would get an opportunity. Chris Board came in as a free agent. He's really shown himself as more of a depth guy and not necessarily teams. Right. Yeah. At special teams. But I think they're going to ride with Okereke. I get the sense that, I don't know if Bobby and either the coaching staff or Joe Schoen are going out for dinner every night saying, how are we going to make this work long term? But I think Bobby is respected by his teammates, and I think he has put last year behind him to an extent where he's out there, he's performing. I think also, Justin, at the end of the spring, it was a little questions as to why Bobby wasn't there at the end of the spring. So there was that uncertainty of, was he hurt? Was he not there? Was he upset? Where was that going? I mean, in the sense, and I haven't talked to Bobby much off of podium because we haven't been in the locker room at all, but I get the sense that, he knows, look, this regime has moved on from guys, even beyond the Blake Martinez situation, because I know for a fact the front office wanted to keep Blake Martinez. They didn't necessarily want him to start games, but it was Wink Martindale who basically went to the front office and said, I can do without this guy. Like, I don't need this guy here. Joe Schoen, I think, wanted Blake Martinez to stay because he was cheap labor at that time when they were having a miserable time getting down to the cut. So, yeah, to answer your question, I mean, maybe it was a little bit of a misread on my part on the spring, or maybe I've seen more now to kind of fill in the gaps of what I didn't know back in the spring. But I do think that Bobby will be here. It sounds like he's embraced year 2 with Shane Bowen, and they're going to try to make it work. I mean, really, the best path forward for Bobby Okereke is to have a big year and then force the Giants to say, okay, if you're going to let me go, and then I'll just cash in somewhere else and get a better opportunity.
Yeah. Marcus Mbow is very, very exciting. He's kind of having an awesome summer, and I'm thinking in my head, and like, as a fan, like, what do I want? Do I want this guy to get out there and we make something work and we slide people around? And then I thought of like, no, man, like let's let Marcus Mbow as a day 3 pick have a good summer. Let's get him, gain his confidence. And the Giants already have, answers at guard, and they already have an answer at right tackle and a player that you like, and you may even want to keep that player around after this year. So I don't know, like, just let it be a good problem right now. And usually these things figure themselves out anyway, because he with between Thomas's health and whoever, he may be in the lineup in some way, shape, or form. Marcus Mbow summer. I'm sure you've even talked to him a little bit too. Yep. What's your evaluation on him, and what's he been like?
I'll go to something that Jaxson Darts said after practice on Wednesday about Mbow, because he was asked about him, and he said, he's kept his head down, he's made mistakes, but he liked the fact that he wasn't getting first team reps right out of camp. He wasn't pushed into the second team either. He was playing third team most of the spring. Remember everybody went nuts on social media because Josh Azudu was he was first team tackle before James Hudson went over there and played first team left tackle. And, it was, oh my God, I can't believe we have Azudu as the backup tackle. And there was also talk of Marcus Mbow. And I'll admit it, during the scouting process, everybody said, well, he played tackle in college, but he's probably going to have to kick inside. So the Giants will probably kick him inside and let him compete at right guard. But they gave him an opportunity to show that he can do it at tackle. And I think it's really worked out great for them. Is that I think they have number one, they have a built-in insurance policy for Jermaine Illuminor, who is going into a contract year. And, look, Illuminor, he has a high opinion of himself as a player. I mean, and he just welcomed in his second child. I mean, Jermaine Illuminor is not coming here and saying, okay, give me $2 million. I want to stay with the Giants.
Oh no, he deserves. I mean, him and James Hudson are getting the same contract, and he's got to look back at and go,
Totally agree. So, I think they maybe had some forethought, and they looked ahead and they said, you know what, we're going to keep Mbow at tackle. Let's see if he can do it. We've got Andrew out. They started at the end of the spring. There was the last practice, and they had him at right tackle. Then they had him at left tackle. And it was, whoa, wait a minute. Why is he at left tackle? And then the beginning of camp, he started still again with the third team. Then all of a sudden, bang, second day, he was rock solid, right tackle, second team. Then all of a sudden, when they were dividing and they were sending the first team and the other guys who were in the mix on first team to one side of the field and the rest of the guys to the other side of the field, he was with the first team and the other guys. Mm-hmm. And I think, look, Mbow is athletic. I think his footwork is excellent. I think early on in camp, he was having a difficulty with power. Guys were overpowering him. I think Abdul Carter knocked him down on that one day when Abdul Carter sent JMS kind of, tumbling into the backfield. He did the same thing to Mbow. But 3 weeks later, Bow's not getting overpowered. Like he is holding his ground. And I think, I watched him. He was kind of at a standstill with Will McDonald, who's a double-digit sack guy for the Jets, I think, going into this year. He didn't have to face Jermaine Johnson, but I think he held up pretty well against the Jets. I mean, other than the false start late yesterday in the first team 2-minute drill when they missed the 61-yard field goal from our man from Rutgers, Hey Jude. I think, look, I would keep Mbow exactly where he is right now.
I agree.
You have an insurance policy. You have a lottery ticket. Whatever you're doing to develop him is working. So, yes, you hope and pray that in 2 weeks, Andrew Thomas is out at left tackle, and you have Thomas, Runyon, JMS, Van Roten, and Illuminor. Then you have Evan Neal as a backup guard. We'll see who else is the backup guard. And then you have Hudson and Mbow as your tackles. And if you have to keep Hudson as your swing tackle, again, you have to make that determination. You have to trust Carm Barcelo and James Ferentz and say, all right, in the packages that we are going to need a jumbo tight end, are we better off having Hudson? Are we better off having Mbow? Or do we want Evan Neal as our jumbo tight end where he has tackle experience? He's not playing guard, but you could put him at that jumbo tight end in a run package and have him be a good run blocker. That's all we hear about Evan Neal. Don't put him in space, put him in a tight window. So I love what I've seen from Mbow. It sounds like the Giants have this quiet confidence that's been building. Joe Shane went on the broadcast for NBC last Saturday and said the best thing about Mbow is we don't hear about him. And he's right. When he's on the field, you don't hear about him because we would. We heard about Josh Azudu every single day. Fans wanted to know, why is Azudu in the game? Why is Azudu? Marcus McKeithen, why is he in there? Why is Evan Neal in there? Nobody's asking, why is Marcus Mbow in the game? Everybody's
excited.
Asking, why aren't we talking about Marcus Mbow enough?
Right.
That's the issue. So,
Yeah.
yes, definitely a fifth round pick to get this excited about on the offensive line for the Giants. It's been a long time.
Yeah. You mentioned Evan Neal, and I'm trying to put this in as many people's heads as possible, because I've had this thought going back to the spring, being like, well, what if Evan Neal's in an O line rotation? And I don't even know how I fully feel about O line rotations.
Right.
They did it. Judge did it, and then early on with Dable, they did it as well with Bredesen and Gates. And every time it's been done, it's like, I don't like this. They should just play with the five, and I agree with that. But now, like, Greg Van Roten's in his mid-30s. Evan Neal, who I think is going to maybe struggle as a pass blocker, but maybe kick some ass as a run blocker. And even so, that was the theory.
Right.
And then coming into camp, Art, they're kind of setting it up. Evan Neal is rotating in and out with the first team.
Right.
And there have been certain days where GVR's, he's been on paternity leave and whatnot. So do you think an O-line rotation at guard between Greg Van Roten and Evan Neal? I don't think they would be John Runyon, but do you think that spot and that is a possibility heading into this year?
I remember hearing you say that, and you definitely were the first person to put it out there that I saw about the rotation. And here's what I'll say. I have to see Evan Neal in these next two preseason games. And I have to see if Evan Neal, if we're just seeing flashes because it's practice, or are we seeing flashes because he's getting it? And I think that is important. And I don't think you'll know until you see him out there. And I do think a big part of this is, yes, everything you said about GVR, about his age, but they've done a good job of kind of working those guys in training camp. And I think that was intentional as well. Like, why are we going to burn out Van Roten? I mean, he's our backup center. I think that's where they would go if somehow something happened to JMS. And you know what? I should say Schlotman was hurt last year, so that's another reason why Van Roten got a lot of reps at center. So maybe he wouldn't necessarily be the first guy that goes to center, but look, I think GVR is a respected guy in this locker room. He's a respected guy on that offensive line. If you put him in a rotation with Evan Neal, you better be sure that not only are the four other guys on the line willing to embrace that they've seen enough and they trust Evan enough to do what he needs to do, especially early in the season. Or I can't imagine this, or is the front office pushing the idea of, we got to get Neal in there. We got to get Neal in there. I don't think that's the case. I've talked to Joe Shane. I've talked to people in the front office. I think they've pretty much looked at it and said, yeah, we really would love this to work. But if they really, really, really wanted it to work and thought it would work, they would have picked up his fifth-year option. Right. That would have been the gamble that they would have made. They didn't pick up his fifth-year option. So how much do you want Evan Neal to succeed and then watch him go elsewhere and cash in on the market? That doesn't necessarily make your number 7 overall pick, look any better that you picked him, in that spot. So, again, I can't rule it out, but I think there's a little bit more to do with it. You had Gates, and it was Bredesen, right? It was Bredesen, and that was that the year after Feliciano, or was Feliciano?
No, that was during. That was
when they were doing the guys at guard, right?
I would have loved to there be a rotation between Gates and Feliciano if there was going to be one, but they decided it's like, all right, well, Bredesen, who was like one of our more reliable linemen in that year, they were putting him in a rotation. It's like, damn. So again, that's one of the reasons why you hear rotation and as Giants fans, you're like, we didn't like the past ones, but I don't know. We'll see how it works out. But Neal's got to play in the preseason games. That's bottom 100%. Line. You got to say him.
He's got to play his way into the lineup. I mean, is that opportunity there? Yeah, I mean, if Evan Neal starts coming out and he's plowing people over on Saturday night, and then they come out on the preseason game against the Patriots and he's doing it again, then I'm looking at it going, you know what, we may need to find a way to get Evan on the field on game days in certain situations, like you said. But on the eve of the first preseason game, where he was going to get a ton of exposure for himself and for the Giants, he couldn't play.
Right.
And again, I don't know exactly what happened injury-wise. I just heard he got banged up in practice. So it may not have been Evan saying, I can't go. It may have been the training staff holding him back saying, no, he can't play. But either way, go on the field on Saturday night, show that you can be a part of that first team rotation wherever that first team goes, and then come back to me on Monday or Tuesday and say, hey, what about that rotation? I'm sure you'll be tweeting Saturday night
Oh
if
yeah.
Evan Neal is plowing people all over the place. But let's see Evan Neal in games,
Yeah.
because we all know what we saw when Evan Neal got in games. You talk about we talked about the mentality of Jaxson Dart and how right now it hasn't been too big for Marcus Mbow. Evan Neal, at times it was too big for him, and they were too fast for him or too athletic. I think Evan Neal's got to show that he can do this job.
One more for you, and it's my favorite question to ask beat reporters this time of year. And by the way, Duggan came on the show last week, and I asked this question, and he was like, I can't fully answer this because I know all their beat writers or maybe listen to the show, and he can't show his hand. So I'm like, I have to start outlawing that answer because that answer kind of stinks. What are you following? What are you thinking about? What are you writing about? Obviously, the Jaxson Dart piece that's coming out today, but
Yep.
what are some things that you're thinking about, writing about, analyzing, watching that maybe some others aren't?
It's a good question. I think the value of Devin Singletary, I think that's number one. I think that's shown up. I think, and I was at the front of the line of the Cam Scatterboo is going to have an impact this season, and he still may, but he's got to get on the field again. And, I think Singletary has done what he always does in the last week or so. I think he has the trust of the coaching staff. So I think Singletary is a guy on offense. I wrote about Theo Johnson at the beginning of camp. I still think that after Malik Neighbors, I still think it's a potential that Theo Johnson is the number 2 weapon on this offense if they use the tight ends wisely. And we know Russ likes to use the tight ends. And the other guy on defense that I would look at is Drew Phillips. And I think that, I think we all know the safety combination is probably, to me, I threw a little hyperbole. You'll love this. It goes back to, I say they're the best safety combination the Giants have had since Roll and Kenny Phillips back in 2011. And I know it's on paper, but I like what Holland brings to the table. I like Tyler Nubin and what Holland's play will allow Nubin to do. But I'm going to Drew Phillips. Paulson Adebo said it on a conference call with us, on a Zoom call, that everyone wants to talk about Adebo and then either Banks or Flott. And Adebo is the one who said, don't forget about the nickel, because I think the Giants believe Drew Phillips might pound for pound be their best corner. And that's including Adebo. And it's not a slight against Adebo, but I think Drew Phillips has shown, now he's got to stay healthy, and he likes to mix it up a little bit. So, you got to worry about his shoulder from last year and make sure he's a smaller guy. But Drew Phillips is a guy that I'd like to watch over the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably have something on him just in terms of the value of that nickel spot and how more and more, look, remember last year or 2 years ago, Adoree Jackson moved to the nickel for week 1 against Dallas because of CeeDee Lamb, and all of a sudden Trey Hawkins was starting on the outside, and everyone was like, oh, it was so great for Trey Hawkins. That wasn't about Trey Hawkins completely. That was about finding a nickel who could actually match up with CeeDee Lamb. And I think you're going to see that early on in the year, and I think Drew Phillips is the guy who has to show that he's ready to kind of be that guy who can cover and who can come up and play the run, because, they need guys to play the run too. If you're in your nickel and you're going to have your pass rushers on the field with Dex, you're going to need that nickel guy to be able to come up and be a run stopper and be a guy who's willing to stick his head in there. And I think Drew Phillips is. So that would kind of be my a couple guys that I'm looking at. And I think, it'll be interesting. And I think, Justin, let's not forget, weeks 1 and 2, there are huge, enormous stories about Washington and Dallas. Mm-hmm. Terry McLaurin and Micah Parsons.
Sit out.
They're their best players. I mean, arguably, best non-QB, no doubt, in Washington is Terry McLaurin. We know Jaden Daniels. And then you can make an argument for Dak. But Micah, I mean, you're talking about a top 5 player potentially in the NFL, any position. The fact that they're having that acrimony I think kind of plays into the Giants a little bit. That week 1 and 2, everyone's going to be talking about Washington and Dallas. I think the Giants need to be able to surprise some people, go down there and play your best ball and give it a shot. I mean, everybody expects you to be 0-2 anyway, but you might as well take your shot.
The best way to stick it to your team that if you want to get paid, don't play against a divisional opponent.
Yeah.
Don't play. Yeah. Just sit out.
The thing about Jerry Jones, though, I could see him adding just, okay, we'll give Mike another $5 million.
Yeah.
I don't care.
And then they'll wonder why they're paying their players so much money when they wait until the 11th hour to do it.
Right.
Exactly. I'll tell you why I can't stand the Cowboys. And it's almost like, well, why do you? I can't stand them as a Giants fan because they've had such good rosters for a decade straight, and they did nothing with it. Okay, but is that the reason why you hate them as a Giants fan? No, it's because they did nothing with their really good rosters. Yet they've beat the crap out of us for the last decade too. So it's like you can't have it all. You can't disappoint and then lose to us. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's true. Art Stapleton. Tell people where they could find you, even though they already know.
Twitter, X, and Instagram are all art_Stapleton. I've joined the TikTok revolution.
Oh, yes.
Not like 5 years too late, but that's Art Stapleton straight across, posting as many videos as I can. It's time to get the numbers up on the old TikTok. And then obviously NorthJersey.com. And you ever want to email me, it's Stapleton@NorthJersey.com. Story idea, want to tell me how you hate my podcast and how I need to be talking more about Justin and everybody over here. You can do that.
Email Art and say we want Justin on the All In podcast. Boom.
Justin can come on the All In podcast whenever. Justin's got multiple podcasts going now, so your schedule is very busy. I would say that.
Art Stapleton, thank you so much.
Justin, thanks, man.
All right, thank you so much to Art Stapleton for coming on the show. We will be live. I will be live on Saturday night, and we're going to talk all about the Giants and Jets. So after the game's over, probably, I don't know, give or take half an hour, try to get some thoughts, try to get some notes together. We're going to go live. We're going to react to everything that happens. We're going to react to Evan Neal kicking ass. We're going to react to Jalin Hyatt catching a couple touchdown passes. We're going to react to Jaxson Dart throwing some more touchdowns as well. Maybe the starters are going to play a little bit more. It's funny that Brian Dable said last week, the starters are, he kind of like, we got to play a little bit more. And then he kind of has started to walk that back a little bit this week as injuries and seems like just load management things have piled up. So hopefully everybody's okay. Hopefully Malik Neighbors is going to be okay. Hopefully it's just management stuff with him. Hopefully he's not a player that kind of just stays hurt, even though he was a tough son of a bitch last year. He played through shit last year. So, all right, let's go Giants. I'll see you on Saturday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
It starts today. Let's go Giants! We woo!